Hi, my name is Caleb and I'm an alcoholic. Sobriety date of December 12th of 2020. Rarely have we seen... I'm just kidding. That was what the other person did. Oh, that was a joke. So I was born in Bethesda, Maryland on April 7th of 1980 blank, in case somebody tries to steal my identity. My parents were both... what? I'm serious. Parents are both musicians. They were both in the Army chorus growing up. And one cool thing about being surrounded by music my whole entire life, I remember being... So we lived in Virginia, right next to Fort Myers, which is the military base. And I remember getting on these tour buses as kids going to the 4th of July show. And we'd drive out there and get a police escort, which I thought was normal also. And we get to the very, very front of the National Mall, and we'd sit on like the second, and like, well, I was like, Mom, how come we can't sit on the first row? He's like, let the other kids sit on the first row. But then one year I decided to look behind me, and I was like, holy crap, there are a lot of people here. And I had no idea. I thought this was just a little concert for us on the 4th of July. So, my parents never drank. My grandpa is an alcoholic. Well, was an alcoholic. He, unfortunately, he drank himself to death. So he is like quite literally, drank himself to death one day. So, we'd always go to Florida to see my grandpa. When we were growing up, we'd make the trek all the way down to Florida when we were kids. And it was usually the day after Christmas that we'd get in the car and we'd get in our little Toyota Previa van. And I remember making mixtapes to listen on the way down there. And like my parents would only let us listen to a certain amount of these tapes because my parents wanted to make sure that we had conversations with them in the car. So way before all the DVD players and stuff, but it was a 10-hour drive. And we'd get down there and I'd get to this giant ranch. And I remember my grandfather just loved to drink all the time. He'd get nearly fall down drunk every night, which I didn't really realize at that time. But what I did realize at that time is that he loved to smoke cigarettes. And he would smoke these, in fact, I remember they were Durals. Does anybody know Durals? Do we have any Durals smoke? We got one in the back corner. Yeah, Durals. But ever since that, I've just grown up with this lovely, like, affinity to the smell of cigarettes. So, and I'm getting off topic. So, he also was in a good old alcoholic fashion. He was divorced 3 times. So I know my grandma, she died. Then there's my step-grandma. She is still alive. And then my step-grandma, she was pretty cool. She was fun. I remember the first time I heard the F word was one time when my grandpa was watching college football, and my step-grandma got so distraught, because I come from a proper Christian home where my parents didn't say words like that she was like, James, give them $50 and let them go to the mall. So he gave us $50 and we went to the mall, and that's all we happened. That's basically my childhood. It was a good childhood. My parents really desired us to have I guess I want to say sheltered life. They didn't let us go to public school. They made sure that we went to private school, and was raised in the church, and a fairly conservative church. So when I was about 11 years old, we moved to a little town called Harrisonburg, Virginia. And that is where my dad started working for this church called Covenant Presbyterian, where they definitely, let's just say that the preacher there had a 3-part sermon about why homosexuality was wrong. So that wasn't exactly the best upbringing at that church. I was homeschooled through the 6th grade, and we'd go to different homeschool groups. And then in the 7th grade, I got to go to Christian school. And it was like, wow, that was so much fun. I got to be around kids like my own age, and it was fantastic. I used to go outside, or if there was like a carpenter that would come work to my house, I used to be like, Mom, can I go watch the carpenter work? And I'd sit and watch the carpenter work on the house the entire day, and that would be called education. So I guess, I don't know. That was weird. So luckily, when I got to go to school, I was very happy, and it was fantastic to be around people. In fact, when I was homeschooled, my parents actually thought that I had a learning disorder because it took me forever to learn information. And then my dad told me later that like my mom would cry at night, and I'm like, well, should have put me in school earlier, I guess. So that wasn't supposed to be a joke, but I love it when people laugh when it's not supposed to be funny. That's like, kind of like my life in a nutshell right there, actually. So I got to go to this little Christian school called Eastern Mennonite High School, and it was there that I discovered my love of choral music, and I just absolutely fell in love with singing. We got to be in a touring choir that went to all these little Mennonite churches in the country. We're talking about like the country church where you go and like all the old ladies just are like, oh, there's some young people here. It kind of sounds like the church that I work at. Oh, I hope nobody's listening. And then we'd sing a program there, and then they'd have this gigantic potluck. And you never would have guessed how many variations of cheesy potatoes could be present at one time. There are the tater tot version, there was a shredded potato version, there was the au natural, just like cute. Anyway, that's enough about cheesy potatoes. But I just fell in love with singing, and we got to go all across the nation on tours, and I also got to go to China during that time. And that's where I discovered that I really wanted to become some sort of, be in the education field. So throughout that time in high school, well, I also found out that I liked boys. I thought that they were more like my brotherly figures, the older guys, and I'd be like, oh, they're going to be my brothers. And that didn't, I didn't realize it then, but I should have started figuring things out right then. Throughout that time, until both my brother and I were of the age of 18, my parents did not drink because they knew that my grandfather was an alcoholic, and they didn't want us to be exposed to people drinking. They wanted to show us that sobriety was possible. So ever since I was young, this idea that you have alcoholic family, you need to be careful, has been instilled in my mind. It didn't work, but they tried. So I decided to go, after high school, I decided that I wanted to major in violin. And I spent my first year at this little Christian school. I want to say it a Christian school because I was still a little goody-goody Christian boy. I still wanted to be involved in that sort of small education or smaller school education, and I decided to go to this little school called Belhaven University in Jackson, Mississippi. Don't go to Mississippi, by the way. It wasn't very pleasant. I lasted a year there, and then I decided to transfer back to my hometown, to James Madison University, where I got my undergraduate degree in music education. I decided to switch to vocal music and got that degree. And then I got to student teaching, and I was like, I do not enjoy this very much. And I was like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do with my life if I have a degree in music education and I don't enjoy educating people? So I was like, well, maybe it's time to rethink life a little bit. So it wasn't until the very end of my college life, I remember being, we were on a choir tour in England. And I remember we were singing with a bunch of choirs combined. And I think we were in London actually. And I was standing next to this guy and I was like, holy crap, this is a good looking man. And I'm like, he is so hot. And then I was like, that kind of planted the seed in my head, and I'm like, Caleb, you haven't had an affinity towards men this whole time. You weren't appreciating the male body. You're gay. And it was during that tour that I'm like, holy crap, you're used to like small town, and all the pieces started to come together in my head, and I'm like, when you were walking on the quad and the other guys were looking at the ladies sunbathing in their bikinis, and you were watching at the shirtless guys throw frisbee back and forth, that wasn't you appreciating the male body. That was you being gay. So I eventually figured that out and decided that I needed to accept that about myself. And I took a year off to go to the Episcopal Service Corps. It sounds like I was in the military. I really wasn't. I don't think I'd last a day in the military. So the Episcopal Service Corps was part of this organization through the church that I was going to that took people for a gap year usually between after they finished school, and they put you in locations throughout the U.S., where you'd volunteer for basically a whole year. And I lived in an intentional community with 8 people for a whole year. And I think a few of them were alcoholics too, because we liked to drink a lot during that time too. But I was stationed at a soup kitchen called Community Soup Kitchen, and I worked there and really enjoyed my time there. But it was during that time that I figured out that I really struggled with anxiety. There were some times between with coming out to my parents and trying to figure out what a relationship with them looked like, reconciling my Christian faith and my new beliefs. All of those things kind of came to a head, and it was nearly debilitating for a while. Like, I'd go to work and I'd come back, and there were days that I'd just lie face up and stare at the ceiling for like half an hour and just hope that I'd calm down. And I did not want to go get help. I wanted to do things my way. I can be stubborn sometimes. So I didn't see a psychologist. I didn't see anybody. I just decided that I didn't want to have any meds. And I was able to get through that. There were a day or two of those times that I had some suicidal thoughts, but never enough to like actually think about going through with it. So that was tough, but it was also during that time that I'd come back and forth from Connecticut to Virginia where my parents lived. And I came out of the closet to them, and my dad was fairly accepting, and it was tough for my mom. She asked me if she could send me a book to read, and I was like, no, you don't get to send me a book. You've had 18 years of my life to indoctrinate me with your beliefs about homosexuality. So I didn't say it exactly that way. I'm a little bit nicer. It's in hindsight that I wish I had the audacity to say things like that sometimes. So she had to reconcile, I guess, her beliefs with that. And we still we love each other, but we don't see eye to eye about a lot of those things. So during that gap year and during that time of anxiety and turmoil, that's where my drinking started getting heavier. Like we always say, drinking alcoholism is a progressive disease. This is where it started sneaking up into my life, where like I was getting a little more uncomfortable with how much I was drinking. At the end of that, or towards the end of that gap year where I was volunteering, I'd been involved in singing for a lot of choirs all throughout Connecticut and at Yale. And so some of my friends that were in the program there, they have a graduate school program. They're like, you need to apply for this program. So I decided to apply and got accepted to go there for their choral conducting 2-year master's degree. So I ended up staying in Connecticut for 2 more years after that initial gap year. In grad school, I got to learn from countless fantastic musicians, and I got to travel all across the world, about 8-9 different countries during that time, and got to spend fantastic time getting to know people and just learning about different cultures. But throughout all those travels, too, there were those nights where you'd go out and just start drinking heavily, and almost everybody would drink. We'd drink after rehearsals. We'd drink sometimes before rehearsals. We'd drink on the weekends. We'd drink because it's a Tuesday, all that fun stuff. So I remember one night during grad school, it was the first night that I drank by myself, ever. And I decided that I was going to listen to music in my room with some headphones and drink a bottle of Trader Joe's 2-Buck Chuck. And I just had so much fun sitting there. I think I drunk posted on some band's website saying that they need to come to New Haven and do a concert because I thought that they definitely cared what I thought about them. So anyway, all those sorts of fun things. Oh, and then I think I did some yoga too at the end. Anyway, so still drinking too much, but not to blackout, not that kind of stuff. So after grad school, I was really kind of burned out with music, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. So I decided to move to Austin, where my brother and my sister-in-law lived. I didn't get along super well with my brother, but my sister-in-law, she was fairly liberal, and they were 2 people that I came out to early during that time too, and they accepted me from the get-go, so I felt that they were safe people to be around. Now, it turns out that both my brother and my my ex-sister-in-law, they're divorced now, are both alcoholics. My brother's in the program now, and we'll get to it, but he was the one who 12-stepped me into the program. My sister-in-law is still out, or my ex-sister-in-law is still out drinking, and it's affecting her relationship with the kids and all that kind of stuff. So she's a mess. So when I was in Austin, I basically drank all the time with them. And my sister-in-law was definitely an enabler and an encourager, we'll say. I learned through the program, you never blame your alcoholism on anybody. So it's nobody's fault but my own. But we drank a lot together. We drank on Easter. We drink around the kids. Drunk Uncle Caleb does tell really good bedtime stories and all of the voices of the characters, though, I will say that. But everything was centered around alcohol. And it's during that time in Austin that my drinking career really got unhealthy. Has anybody been to Austin? One person. Okay, yeah, thank you for actually raising your hands. I like interactiveness here. Austin is like a playground for alcoholics. You can get beer at the grocery store. You can get beer at the children's playgrounds. I mean, like, seriously, we'd go to Central Market, get beers, and let the kids play on the playground. That's not healthy, y'all. Kids shouldn't be seeing you, Uncle Caleb, get drunk while they're at the playground. Anyway, so after a while, they moved away. They moved back to Virginia. And it was at that time I'd kind of lost my drinking partner. So I started sequestering myself by myself in my apartment with handles of vodka. Vodka was my go-to beverage because, the hangover wasn't awful if you didn't drink way too much, if you mixed it with the right thing. So instead of finding new friends and doing more things, I decided I was going to drink more, spend more time in my apartment, do more things that I wanted to do. And it's during that time that I got my first post-grad school church job. And I really wasn't happy or fulfilled with that job. So that, I think, is also why I drank. I drank to cover up my unhappiness with life, with my unhappiness with all sorts of stuff that was going on. My boss did confront me one time saying that he could smell alcohol on my breath, and you'd think that would be enough to get one sober, but I decided instead of quitting drinking, I was just going to quit drinking at times that I shouldn't be drinking. And I was like, oh, well, that worked really well. I'm only drinking every night and on the weekends now. Fantastic. Good job. No. So that was supposed to be a joke, but nobody laughed. Okay. So after a while, I decided we had a super conservative minister move to that church that I was working at, and he doesn't like gays very much. Well, he got along with me fine. He just doesn't agree with homosexuals. He also was, I don't know, we'll stop talking about him. So I moved here and took another job at a church, and I was like, it was during that move that I was like, maybe this will be what drives me up. Maybe this is enough to make me happy, enough to make me not want to drink. I was starting to think that I needed to tone down on drinking. But again, like a good old alcoholic, that didn't work, just like all that we've tried. And again, so I kept on drinking instead of going out and experiencing new things in Dallas, instead of taking advantage of the multitude of things that are around here to do on the weekend. I just decided that I like my porch with some, I smoked American Spirits then. I decided not to rouse. They weren't very good. But I was an American Spirit smoker, so I'd sit out and do that, because that's really good for a vocalist to do, is drink too much and smoke too much. It's fantastic for your voice. So during this, so drinking was still getting progressively worse, and then it kind of reached a head during COVID. I mean, you're telling an alcoholic that doesn't realize he's an alcoholic that you can't go anywhere, that you're going to work from home on your computer, that you're not supposed to be around anybody except yourself, and don't do anything. So the only place that I'd really go is the grocery store every now and then Total Wine and More. In fact, I went to get one case of vodka at one Total Wine & More, but I didn't want them to think that I was an alcoholic, so I went to another Total Wine & More about a week later because I was getting low on that case. I was like, well, if they really closed down the liquor stores, I'd better have another case of vodka. So I went and got another case of vodka at the other Total Wine & More that was 20 minutes farther, just because I didn't want to be like, oh, he's an alcoholic. Has anybody else done that? I was going to say, yeah, okay, guilty. So my drinking just got out of control, and my current boss, one night I called her and like I was slurring my speech, all that stuff, and she just confronted me in a nice way and said, do you realize that alcohol is a depressant? Maybe you're struggling with depression because you're drinking too much. And I'm like, oh, thank you, but I really am fine. I'm fine. Thank you, though, blah, blah, blah. Like, it was the weekend, I was just having a little fun, all that kind of stuff. So, no. So I decided, I kind of had a breakdown, and I just decided, because of just being sequestered so much, that I need to go home and spend some time at home. And during that time in Virginia, I was like, well, Mom and Dad only have beer and wine, so I won't have to drink too much then. Like, I started drying out a little bit. I'd still have like 8 beers a day, but that was less than what I was drinking by myself. So I started to see the light then, and I was like, well, when I go back, I need to just drink wine or beer. So I got back. And that's when I decided to start going to the grocery store and buying 3 bottles of wine a day. I said, well, 3 bottles of wine, that's okay, Start out with one in my Yeti, and I was like, well, that's 1 glass of wine, because it was a Yeti. It holds 32 ounces. And if they didn't have enough white wine, I'd mix it with orange juice, because the red wine wouldn't go down quite easy enough. So, anybody else red wine and orange juice? Yes, we have one in the back. Oh my gosh, that makes me happy. So I just started drinking still. I just drink way too much alcohol, even before work Zooms and all that fun stuff. And it just got bad and bad. And then, even though I'd switched away from vodka to wine, I would just be miserable about 1 bottle in. And I started drunk texting my brother because I knew during my time back in Virginia, he had just looked just so good. He had this glow to his skin. He'd lost weight. He looked fantastic. I'm like, man, he's doing something right. And I started texting him and told him, yeah, I think I need to stop drinking. I think I'm drinking too much. And he just blew up my phone with all these texts, just like he'd been like waiting for me to say that, because he probably had. But he's like, here's how you find the gay AA groups. Here's how you do all this stuff. And he's like, I just know. And he just encouraged me during that time. And he's like, you need to go to an AA meeting, even if you're drunk. Nobody will judge you. And I'm so glad that he said that, because that's what led me to my first AA meeting. I decided one day that after I'd drinking about 1.5 bottles of wine, that I would go to Lambda via Zoom. And I did. And I had never experienced an AA meeting. And little did I know that people were going to call on me to say something that night. And I think, Eric, were you the chair that first time that I came? I don't know, but it was somebody. But I remember getting called on, and I'm like, well, I just don't have anything to say. I'm not an alcoholic. And then you can just tell everybody's like, yeah. We got another drunk one here. Fantastic. But I knew enough after going to that first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting that there was something there that I wanted. So I decided to go back the next day. And somebody said, keep on coming back. They're like, you're going to be back tomorrow? And somebody saying that was enough to get me back that next day. It was enough to show that these people are interested enough in me that they want me back here tomorrow. And if they want me back, I'm a people pleaser. I'm going to be back. If somebody wants me, I'm going to be there. So I showed up the next night. I only had 1 bottle of wine that time. It was a little bit better. We were starting getting the right way. And I decided that I was going to add that I needed a sponsor, and I reached out to a person who I thought was very studious sounding, that was very well poised, and I was like, will you be my sponsor? And he was like, you're going to have to call me tomorrow. I'm like, okay. that's probably true because I'd already had some wine. I shouldn't have called him. I'm like, well, I'll call you in the morning after. I didn't say, but after I sober up. So I finished my wine that night and decided to call him the next day. You're hearing this a little bit different tonight. So then I made it 3 days. I got read the rights, and I made it 3 days, and I decided to start drinking. And my sponsor was not asking me how many days sober I had after those first 3 days. I was like, 3 days. And he's like, so I got to drink for like 3 more days without him knowing. It was fantastic. But then one ill-fated day, I was on the phone with him, and he said, how many days sober do you have? And I'm like, damn it. How did he find out? And I'm like, oh, you got me. I've been drinking. And he's like, well, just don't drink today. And I'm like, well, I'm going to a party tonight, and I want to drink tonight, so I'm ready to start tomorrow. And he's like, well, we're going to, eventually you're going to have to really commit. He was very kind, but he was like, you're going to have to commit, or I'm going to have to tell you you can't be with me. And so anyway, that happened, and at that next time it really stuck. And throughout the time that I had in Lambda and just in Alcoholics Anonymous in general, people reaching out, feeling wanted, feeling loved. That time I felt like I'd found a place, and a place especially among a bunch of gays that's fantastic. And I don't have many gay friends. So now I'm just like, it's fantastic to look out and just be like, man, I know so many fantastic queens, and I love it. So, okay, that's enough background. I would like to move on. One thing we talk about is we were supposed to talk about what we were like, what happened, and what we are like now. So I got a little bit about what happened, and basically, if you don't hear anything else, just stop drinking. Don't relapse. Don't do anything like that if you can. If you do relapse, come back. It just like life is so much better sober. So I want to talk a little bit about what I was like. I already said that. So what I used to be like, I didn't want to take responsibility. It was always somebody else's fault, whatever happened. There was always somebody else that was more responsible that was a person above me on the chain of work. It was their problem. And the program has really taught me that you need to take responsibility for life, that you need to accept the fact that you're going to fuck up sometimes, and it's okay. And that if you're talking to a normal person, they're going to be okay with you messing up sometimes. They're going to be a lot more understanding of you as a person if you just admit those things and don't make excuses. I didn't take leadership in my work. I'd always wait for somebody else to take the reins. If I was in a meeting, I'd be the one derailing meetings. I'd make jokes. And just the other day, I remember telling our senior pastor we needed to keep things more streamlined during a meeting. I'm like, okay, stop diverting us. We need to get this. And I'm like, who the hell have I turned out to be? I'm actually keeping people on track in a meeting. And it just hit me. I was like, I've never, ever done that before this program. Before I was unhappy and depressed, especially during COVID when I was drinking vodka, I'd stay in bed until noon, 1 o'clock. Be like, well, I guess it's time to get out and find somewhere to get some food and all that fun stuff. And my depression and my anxiety just were through the roof. Physically, my muscles were just so tense and it was just miserable. After giving up alcohol, my anxiety has really gone down a lot. It's still we still have bad days. That's normal, but it's so much exponentially better. Some days, not every day. I'm not going to be becoming sober isn't like taking this magical elixir and everything's farting rainbows and unicorns and everything. That's not what life is. Life still sucks sometimes, and that's okay. But we're given the tools to be able to realize that today is just another day, and it's, some days are not good. So most days I wake up with energy, with happiness, realizing that I have things to do today. Before I was a slob, man, my apartment was a hot mess. Literally piles of trash sometimes, just not wanting to. And Y'all, sometimes there are still some piles of trash, but they're smaller, like down there instead of like there, like only one trash bag worth instead of 3. So it gets a lot better. It's not some magic potion that we take. Before I'd pull back from friends and family, and I wouldn't want to reach out, I wouldn't want to tell people like how my life is, what's going on. And now I can tell if I start doing that in my program, that's a sign of that I'm not doing something right, that I'm not working my program right, that reaching out and being involved in the program is very important for me. Before, I definitely lacked self-confidence. You know I remember when I first came into the program, I was like, having too big of a head is not my problem. The problem is that I don't have enough self-confidence. And Eric was just like, yeah, we'll see about that. And just realizing that having a lack of confidence is also having way too big of a head. Like just learning that life isn't about me all the time. That somebody's not thinking bad thoughts about me or thinking negative things towards me just because something. Guess what? He's probably not even thinking about you at this point. Nobody's probably thinking about what you're doing. So then, again, I never admit fault. And now I'll just own it. If I mess up, I'll say, that was my fault. I'm so sorry. What can we do to fix the situation? I'd not volunteer to do anything at AA when I first started until Eric was like, you have to raise your hand for any question that's ever asked. And I remember, I hate being the person that keeps time, but he keeps on telling me that I have to do that. So I raise my hand even if I don't want to. But I was like, but what if somebody else wants to do it? I don't want to be too, jump the gun too soon and seem like I'm too eager to do this. And then he's like, that won't be a problem. And I'm like, okay, I'll trust you. But it's so funny. I tell my own sponsee that right now. And the other day I was sitting next to him, like, volunteer now. And I poked him in the leg and he did. And I'm like, there you go. This is what it takes sometimes. My weekends are drastically different. Like, when I was drinking, my idea of a weekend was, let's go to Total Wine and More on Friday night because they have the most samples out. You know, when they have all the samples, and I'd go around and I'd sample every single one of those things. And it's like those alcohol reps were my best friends. There was a woman there at Total Wine and More named Liv, and I'd go up to her and give her a hug, and we knew each other by name. And I'm like, maybe that should have been a sign that you're an alcoholic, but that didn't work either. So weekends now are just like full. Like instead of having one thing on one day, it's like, well, I've got 9 to 12 free here, and I've got a slot here, and it's just fantastic being involved with so many people's lives, helping out places, and just experiencing the vast amount of offerings that this Metroplex has. We're in a unique place that both Dallas and Fort Worth are such unique cities. And I know a lot of people probably don't like Fort Worth. Is that true? That's what I hear about Dallas people. Anyway, I live right between, so I can go both ways. I'm bi-city-wool. I don't know. So the biggest thing that I've learned through this program, and it's also my biggest character flaw, going through the 4th step, is that I can be very judgmental at times. My mind automatically gravitates to judging people. And I remember, like, as a kid, too, like, we'd go to a concert or we'd go after church, and my dad would always start picking apart everything, and he'd call it, we're discussing what just happened or something like that. And I realized that I never wanted to be like that as a kid. That made me uncomfortable. I always hated it. But so often I can be that person who's picking apart every little aspect of a situation instead of just being present and being involved in what's going on. So that's something that I have to be on guard for every single day. And some days are better than others. And some days are still not so good. And I just have to catch myself. I can usually find, I've started noticing some physical things that happen to me if I'm not on the beam, as people like to say. And it's really important, I think, for us to recognize both physically and mentally what it feels like if we are on track or off track for a good or a bad day. So those are my before and afters. I'd like to go on for a few lessons. I take notes on my phone sometimes, and I write down all the lessons that I've learned in AA. And there's some funny ones, and there's some really serious ones. So one is actually a lesson that I saw on a bumper sticker on the way to an AA meeting, and it was "Do small things with great love," and Mother Teresa said that. And that to me just really speaks about how we can just do a little thing in somebody's life, and we have no idea what that little thing can, how that can have effect on somebody's life. Has anybody seen that show Skins? It was like really, okay, thank you. At least one person in here has seen Skins. It starts out with this group of youth, of young adults, well, they're probably high schoolers, and they're extremely dysfunctional, and they're doing lots of dangerous stuff with alcohol, sex, drugs, all that kind of stuff. And then and they really just don't get along. They argue with each other, and they just get into a lot of trouble. But then after that first episode, it dives into each one of their lives and shows you what's going on in their lives to make them be that sort of way. And ever since I saw that, I'm like, we really have to be careful about what we do around a person, because you never know what that person next to you has gone through that day or what they're going through in their present day life. So do small things with great love, and you have no idea how you could change somebody's life. Another one is be in the present. Don't let anything from the past or the future affect how you respond to things. That really sticks with me too, because the program also says, or that I've learned from the program, that don't do anything off of the way that you feel. Because if you're having a fantastic day or you're having a really bad day, guess what? That's probably going to change tomorrow. You never know how you're going to feel about that the next day. So if you're making a decision or don't know what to do, just sit on it for a while. Don't make any quick decisions. Stop being a taker and be a giver. We have taken for so much of our lives, now it's time to give back. You know, at first I thought that, I think we all give sometimes in our lives, and we give a fair amount on a regular basis, but we don't realize how much we take from the people around us. And, I just would always take for granted the kindness that people show me, instead of saying, it takes energy that they are investing in me to be kind. And I would also often be kind when it was convenient. And it's time in my sobriety to start being kind and nice and doing things for people when it's inconvenient for me, to show some of that back. There is a big difference between wanting something and being willing to do something. So often we want the outcome instead of being willing to do what it takes to get that outcome. So I think it's important for us to be able to invest in the things that we want and know that it's not going to be an immediate gratification. Another beautiful one that I just absolutely love is, if you think your AA group is your newfound community, you're wrong. The whole world is. We will learn from connections. We will form connections with other AAs everywhere. There's something so beautiful about being able to go anywhere in the world, or if you go home to see your parents and getting to go to an AA group, you have this immediate bond with a group of people just because we're alcoholics together. We know what it can be like to be going through a bad time, and seeing those in-laws that you don't want to see. All you have to do is say, I'm visiting my in-laws, and you will have a lot of people that are like, oh, we get you, honey. Don't go drink. One that I just heard the other day is, we have to go all in our sobriety. If we put everything on the table, blessings will keep on coming. Another one is, today is the tomorrow we worried about yesterday. So why worry? We don't have, worrying does not change one thing in our lives. It's taking action. Oh wait, I'm seeing some looks. Today is the tomorrow we worried about yesterday. Does that make sense? It took me a while. I had to write it down to make it sense. So basically, like today is that future that we were worried about tomorrow. So why were we worried about it? Because we're right anyway. So the one that I just found today in my notes is act like the person you want to be, not the person you are today. You know that thing that they tell you when you go to work at a fancy place? They're like, don't dress for the job you have right now. Dress for the job that you want to have. Has anybody heard that before? A few people? Like, that's what I think AA is. Like, don't act like the person you are now. Act like what you want to be. Because guess what? If you start acting like the person you want to be, you're going to become that person. So, really quickly, steps 6 and 7 in the 12 steps were really what stuck out to me, what made the most sense to me. And the book Drop the Rock really affected my program and the sobriety that I have right now. And I want to read you 2 quotes from that book. The first one really helped me in reconciling what I things with my parents as far as my sexuality and that whole turmoil that I have with them as far as some other aspects of my life. And this is the quote: most of us do not take the time to closely examine our lives and our manner of living. We make basic assumptions early in life and go on from there, rarely questioning if they need to be changed and if they were effective to begin with. Many of us took the values and method of our parents at face value, even though we thought we rebelled and changed from them, and we find ourselves living very similar lives to theirs. It is important to make sure we know what kind of life we are living if we are to change it. So that sort of self-examination of our life, I think, is extremely important. And daily thinking about, is this a belief that I have because of something of what I was exposed to growing up, or other people exposed me to this, or is this a truth that I truly want to base my life on? One more quote from that is the prayer that they tell you to say. It's their version of the 7-step prayer. And it's, God, give me the courage and strength to know who I really am, to act accordingly in my life, and to refrain from diverting my time, energy, and interest into my character defects. That hit me today as I was preparing more for this evening, and that prayer I just think really, I know personally I need to integrate more into my daily life, thinking about, like, what am I investing my time in? And is it something that's going to make my life better? Is it something that's going to help other people as well in life? So, in closing, I think I'm right about that time. In closing, I wanted to share with you the most important lesson that AA has taught me. And it's that I'm not that special, and that you aren't that special. And I know that it may sound negative and depressing, but it's true. We are all deserving of love and acceptance, of a place to be comfortable and cared for. We all deserve to be happy in life. We are also all called to be productive members of society, giving back to others in all ways possible. We have to work to do this every single day. If we all live into this reality, our lives will be fulfilling and full of joy, and we will leave this world a better place than when we came into it. If you are new to this group or struggling in your sobriety, know that you are in the right place. A room filled with people who won't let you slide in your life, that will hold you accountable and not tell you what you want to hear. Your life will be forever changed if you apply yourself to these 12 steps and involve yourself in this AA group. It truly works if you apply yourself and put in the effort. It's time to wake up, carpe diem, or seize the day. Thank you for letting me speak.